Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So in this video we'll be creating a very modern and futuristic looking beach home within the Sims 4 within Sulani on a 30 by 30 lot. And I decided to go with something that looks very futuristic because I wanted to just like incorporate some features that looked unique and like doesn't really resemble like a generic beach house, if that makes sense. So I wanted something that was like sort of floating above like the rocks and stuff, and this was like the perfect location to do it, especially since it was over water. I wanted to create something that looked really interesting and visually appealing to look at, so I hope I was able to like sort of execute that in some sort of way, if that makes sense. So I was trying to focus on just like trying to elevate the second story of this home to be at a specific level so that I was like happy enough with it to like progress onto it and just like place a very nice swimming pool on top of it. And this was where I placed like the main specific rock feature. I used quite a few rocks from different packs, obviously the main ones coming from either from Sulani, from the world itself, or the ones that came from the Snowy Escape, because they just come in like a really nice dark color and it worked with the rest of the colored rocks that we have in the environment that we're working with already. And I was just like really happy with how it was like sort of having this like over the water sort of like flowing design for the swimming pool itself. And I was actually inspired by an image that I had seen on Pinterest, but that was sort of like the only inspiration that I sort of got from images, as unfortunately I didn't really have anything else to like base this house off of. So I was just going off of like what I felt looked nice and what was like feeling like it was like the best way to do something, if that made sense. And we didn't really have a lot of space to work with. We are working with a 30 by 30 lot, so I was just trying to make it look as interesting as possible in a small amount of space, if that makes sense. So we're also utilizing some of the new windows, which are those free tiled ones, and I just really love how they work super nicely when it comes to building these modern homes, because you're just able to place those really huge one and it covers a lot more wall space rather than having to utilize those two tiled ones. There's just like a lot more designs when you use that one, because there's just like a bunch more lines where the end of the window frames are. So I feel like by utilizing these windows it just makes it look a bit more like clearer. I wish we had the option to sort of just like make a huge wall of just like a clear window wall, but unfortunately we can't really do that at the moment. But so far I wanted this sort of like infinity edge looking design for the swimming pool, and the way I was able to do that was just by like placing some windows on the edge of the swimming pool where I wanted that sort of infinity edge design. And I just lowered it and I just made it smaller by utilizing the tool mod, just to the point where it pretty much looks like it's invisible. And by doing that you can't see any of the swimming pool like windows, but it actually like functions as if it's like a normal window, if that makes sense. So you can see through into the pool, which I feel like was kind of like a nice unique feature. And I also laid these pedestals down along the bottom of the swimming pool area, which I feel like made it look a bit more interesting, because I wanted to give it like some sort of thick wall feature, if that makes sense, because I feel like it didn't really make a lot of sense when the walls just looked super thin at like that edge of the swimming pool. So yeah, I was just trying to make it feel and look a bit more realistic. And I also utilized a stone slab which came from the Spa Day game pack as well, just to like make that wall a little bit more thicker as well. And I also darkened the swimming pool as well to make it feel like it matches really nicely, because when you use a window on the swimming pools it makes it look really light inside. So I just ended up changing some of the colors for the wallpaper and the flooring to make it feel like it was like a bit more darker in color, if that makes sense. And I really wanted to have this like sort of patio sort of like bay area that sort of like extends out into the ocean area, which is like supported by rocks. And you would see as we progress later in the video how I like incorporate those rocks which really match the rest of the environment, and it just looks really nice in my opinion. And I actually did that in my previous beach house that I did like a few years ago back as well. So I just really love utilizing that sort of like really modern and sleek looking design. And right now I'm just like trying to get an idea of like what kind of shape I wanted to create for this beach home in particular, because I wasn't really going off of any image in particular. I was just trying to estimate and just like guess what I feel like would look best within this environment. So the front of the home looked relatively blocky, but it does actually end up changing quite a lot as we progress later in the video as well. But yeah, I was just like really puzzled on like what kind of design I wanted to go with, because I just wanted it to look really sort of like magnificent. I wanted it to be very extravagant, like really huge, and like feel really modern and elegant. As I mentioned, like it's trying to sort of like resemble a futuristic beach home, but I still wanted to keep it like, you know, relatively like down to earth, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm just trying to incorporate a bunch of different rocks, which I did actually unfortunately have to skip through as I was like placing them and stuff like that, because I was utilizing the tool mod quite a lot to like place them in different ways and just like rotating them in unique ways to act as if they were like actually supporting the build itself, if that makes sense. So yeah, so like as you guys can see right now, I'm just like trying to move and adjust a bunch of different rocks, and I feel like it didn't really make a lot of sense to utilize rocks on one side of the home and then not use it at all on the other side. So yeah, it was just like a bit of a time consuming process to get all of this like rock placement as best as possible, because I feel like that's what makes this home look realistic as possible, if that makes sense. Here's just like one of those examples where I just like made one of those rocks like really slanted, and it sort of just like acted as if it was one of those ones that sort of were like supporting the house, if that makes sense. And I also utilized these very nice small simple like black rocks around like the edge of where this like we have this jet ski sort of like landing pad bay area, if that makes sense. So it was just like a nice way to sort of just like act as if it was like supporting that part of the home, if that makes sense. And I was trying to like focus on the environment more than the home itself at this moment, because I feel like the home itself will shape itself as we progress with like sort of like adding the small details around the environment, because I wasn't really 100% sure with what I wanted to go with within this moment on like how I wanted the home to like look and be shaped as. So I was just like going around the entire home, just like trying to add all the rocks and the environment pieces and the flowers and stuff. But eventually we do actually get a very nice and unique looking shape for the build, which I feel like turned out really nice, and it looked super spacious, and it worked with the sort of like goal that I had in my mind initially. So we're also going with the small wall heights for the first and second floor, but the third floor that you can see right at the top has that very nice medium wall height, which I just really love utilizing, and I wish we had that throughout the rest of the home. But because we had that pool, that floating pool on the second floor, I feel like it wasn't really realistic to have a really tall wall height, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just tried to make it feel and look really realistic, and I also added some artificial grass on certain parts of the different levels of the home. And so far you can sort of just like get a general shape of what the home looked like, and it was sort of just like coming together. I was utilizing these very nice floor to ceiling windows and stuff, and I feel like it looked really nice initially, but then I just felt like there was just a bit too much. It looked a little too complex in the sense that like there was just like too many levels going on for this really simple home that I was trying to envision. But unfortunately it wasn't really working out, so we do actually end up changing it from how it looks right now. But I was just really happy with how the window placement and stuff like that turned out overall for this build. I did actually use a lot of businesses and hobbies build items, because I just feel like they work the best when it comes to these like modern builds and stuff like that. So yeah, I do apologize if you guys do not have that pack, but I highly recommend you guys to sort of just like substitute it for a different one if you guys have like eco lifestyle and stuff, because they pretty much have like similar modern objects and stuff. That makes sense. But right now I'm just like sort of adding some nice exterior furniture around the entire home, such as like the nice jet skis and the sun lounges and stuff like that. I believe that this home feels more like an entertainer's home, because I feel like there's just like a lot of different levels and just like a lot more lounging areas throughout this entire home, which I feel like feels really luxurious. So I feel like this home can definitely be used as a resort, such as like a vacation like rental lot, or if you wanted to actually utilize it as a normal like functioning home. I feel like it would work either way, because it does also incorporate a nursery as well as all of the functional objects that you would probably expect to see within a normal house build, if that makes sense. But I also wanted to make sure that it was viable and suitable to be utilized as a normal like residential rental or a vacation rental, if that makes sense. But I do actually really love the utilization of this rooftop as well. It just gave some extra sort of like nice detail to the home rather than just like leaving it completely plain and empty, in my opinion. And I did actually really love the sort of like fake grass utilization throughout the home. But as you guys can see right now, we do actually end up changing the left hand side of the home completely, because I just didn't really like having many different levels, and by extending that second floor all the way to where the first floor was, it sort of like gave me extra space to just like add some more rooms to this home, because I feel like the home is relatively on a smaller lot, and I wanted to make sure that I could place as many bedrooms and rooms as I could. So yeah, that was like the main reason why I actually extended it out and just like kept it in a more simple design and flowy way, if that makes sense. And it also gave me the opportunity to sort of just like make that sort of like nice hangover bit for the second floor sort of like roof area, if that makes sense, which is sort of just like a nice unique take as well. And I also utilize a lot of these like nice simple wall line decors going across like most of the glass window areas, just to make it feel like there was like a bit of privacy, and it just added some extra details that I feel like the home was actually really lacking, especially since we're going for a plain white sort of like wallpaper exterior. I feel like it really needed that extra detail that we had going across the entire build. And I also really love the different utilizations of the flooring for each of the different levels, utilizing some of the wood timber flooring as well as like some of these like concrete ones, which I feel like made a very nice distinction, and it sort of just like separated it from being really repetitive going across the entire home, if that makes sense. And the home doesn't necessarily have a specific color scheme. I sort of just like went with what I felt worked best. So we do actually have a lot of natural wood tones, a lot of concrete features as well, but we do actually mainly focus on these like light and airy and earthy sort of tones. So yeah, you would see quite a lot of these like natural wooden and oak looking furniture pieces going on across throughout the entire home. And yeah, so I was also just like going across all of the balcony areas and stuff like that, just adding some extra small little details that I feel like was kind of necessary just to make them feel a bit more complete rather than leaving them like super empty. And I just really love how this home turned out because it was just like a really unique looking home, and the fact that it was like 3-tiered and had quite a lot of space to work with, to be honest, and I was just really happy with how it turned out. But yeah, moving on into the interior now, we're starting off with the furnishing for the kitchen area of this house, and I just really loved how we had this very nice sort of like double thin windows going across, like looking out into the sea. And I knew I wanted to create the sort of like kitchen area here, but this was the area of the home where we had like the least amount of windows, if that makes sense. So since we didn't really have a lot of these like floor to ceiling windows, I feel like it kind of made sense to place the kitchen in this area as it felt the most appropriate. But I just went with this like very nice like simple black and white theme, but then I noticed that it was just a bit too repetitive and I didn't really want to do that, especially for a beach vacation home like this. So I wanted to just like incorporate some additional color into it, so I just incorporated this nice simple wood sort of like timber tone for the kitchen counters instead, and I left the black countertops on top because I feel like it kind of added that nice contrast that this home really needed, because we didn't really have a lot of dark colors anyway, especially since the walls are like plain white. Even though we do have some accent walls, they still follow that sort of like white color scheme, if that makes sense. So I wanted to just like add some nice stuff that felt like was like a bit of contrast to this overall build, if that makes sense. And yeah, I just added some nice simple looking sort of like counter unit areas, just like trying to make it feel really spacious while also making sure that I incorporated all of the necessary objects that you would expect to see in a kitchen like this. I didn't really go too fancy with it because I just feel like we didn't really have a lot of space to work with anyway, so I was just trying to add the stuff that I felt like looked the best and the most appropriate. And there are a bunch of different variations of plants going across this entire home as well, because I just feel like it kind of just made sense to just add a lot of these like nice tropical sort of like palm tree and leaf looking plants throughout this entire home. I just feel like it worked really nicely and it was like really cohesive with the indoor outdoor experience that you get if you guys do plan to play and build within the home. And we do also incorporate these very nice sort of like hanging lights across the center island of the kitchen counter area, which I feel like looked really interesting. I wanted to incorporate a different variation of those lights. I wanted to incorporate something that probably resembled the sea more, or just like felt a bit more beachy, but unfortunately I couldn't really find something specific to that. So I just went with like a generic sort of like one which had these like glass bulbs, and of course I also used a bunch of different saucer lights throughout this entire home as well. But I did make sure to also change some of the specific lights throughout each of the rooms and like the building areas, just like make sure it did fit the environment that it was kind of in. And I really wanted to incorporate a very nice sort of like dining table right where this area is, just like looking straight out into the ocean. I just feel like it looked really nice, and it was just like the best place to place something where you're going to be like sitting down a lot and like being there quite often, in my opinion. So I feel like it kind of made sense to just like place it right where this window bay area is, and I just feel like it worked out really nicely overall, especially with the color scheme that I went with. Although it does look relatively minimalistic and simple, I feel like it still looks really like intriguing and kind of appealing to look at, because I feel like it worked really nicely with the current colors that we have for the flooring and the wallpaper themselves as well. So in case I haven't mentioned it, yeah, we're actually going for these like white concrete walls along with these like orangey brownish sort of timber wooden flooring for the floors, because I just feel like those are like very common and you would sort of like expect to see this sort of like color scheme within a lot of like beach houses and like a lot of homes that are within like in a beachy area, if that makes sense. And I did also want to incorporate a very nice sort of like nice simple lounging area within this build as well. So despite not really having a lot of space, I was able to utilize these Book Nook Kit 2-seaters to sort of like create this fake sort of L-shaped lounge area, if that makes sense. And I also sized down a very nice looking simple modern fireplace, as well as placing a nice simple TV on top, just to like fill up that little space and just like to incorporate the basic necessities that you would probably like expect within a home. And I did actually surprisingly use quite a few of these sculptures and object pieces which came from the Business and Hobbies expansion pack as well, such as that vase that you would see on the dining table, like on the center of the dining table, as well as like some of these sconces that you would see later in the video, which are these like sort of candle placeholders that you are able to place onto the wall, which act as like lighting. And I just feel like it worked really nicely for this home in particular, because it sort of just like made it feel like it was down to earth and just like felt a bit more realistic rather than really being focused on that futuristic theme, if that makes sense. And also a lot of these like cupboard elements that you would see along like walls and stuff, because I feel like a lot of these beach homes as well, when you go to like rent them and stuff like that, you would see a lot of these like small paintings or like stuff to do with the sea, or like a lot of like fish pictures or like paintings of like islands and stuff on the walls, as well as like a lot of these like different tropical accent walls and stuff, and just like small little like shelving units that you would see like small different like knick-knack clutter pieces on them. And that's sort of just like inspired me to add something like that for this build as well, rather than leaving all of the walls like really plain and empty. So you'd actually see quite a lot of these like different seashell objects and a different like fish collections and pieces and stuff like that, as well as like a few shelving options throughout this entire home as well, because I feel like it kind of makes sense when you are building something like this within this environment. It kind of makes sense to incorporate those specific objects within a build like this as well, in my opinion. But yeah, so moving on into the primary bathroom that you see on the first floor for this build, I didn't really go with anything too special. I just utilized the Dream Home Decorator bathtub, because I just feel like since we were going for a more modern theme throughout this entire home, I feel like it kind of made sense to just utilize something that looked modern and simple. And I also utilized one of my favorite sinks when it comes to creating these like more beachy homes, which is this one, which came from Sulani, because I just feel like it works really nicely, especially since it has that sort of like trunk base, which I feel like looks really unique for a sink, and it kind of worked out really nicely for this build in particular. And since we had quite a lot of space left, I actually wanted to incorporate a shower in there as well, but unfortunately I couldn't really fit it in, so instead I just replaced it with a washing machine. So I feel like it was just like a nice substitute for a different functional object. Just added some nice simple towels on one side of the bathroom, as well as just like trying to incorporate some nice small little clutter pieces, such as that nice simple hanging plant, as well as like a nice simple rug, as well as like that very simple looking mirror that you see on top of the sink area, which I feel like looked really nice, and it worked really well with the rest of the color scheme that we we're going for. And I did also add a lot of different curtains throughout certain parts of the home that I felt was kind of necessary, just to like make it feel a bit more realistic as well, and just like adding to that beachy vibe that we were trying to go for. And of course sticking to that same sort of like bright orange and white and cream color scheme that we had going across the entire home, which I feel like made the home feel and look a bit more realistic in my opinion as well. But yeah, moving on into the gym area. Now you might notice that we actually skipped one of the rooms off to the front area of this gym area, which was sort of just like a nice simple bedroom that we had on the first floor with its own ensuite. If you guys do prefer to see that room in itself as a whole rather than seeing it in like that small little area within the speed build, I highly recommend you guys to stick towards the end of the video just to like see the rest of the entire house tour, so you can just like see pretty much every single room within this build without having to like sort of like go past it or to like seeing it in a speed build version, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I also wanted to incorporate a small simple gym within this build as well, and since this room was relatively close to where all of the rocks were, I couldn't really place a lot of these like floor to ceiling windows and stuff, because I feel like it wouldn't really make sense. So instead I was able to like, I was sort of like forced to keep it in this like very small little room off to the corner where it was like sort of closed off. So I just wanted to instead just like utilize it as a gym room rather than having to create a really sad looking bedroom that wouldn't have any like windows to look out from and stuff like that. Especially in an environment like this, you would probably expect to see and have a room that sort of like had a lot of these like floor to ceiling windows. So I feel like it kind of made sense to just like keep that as like a nice simple functional space. But yeah, moving on into the second floor now, this is one of the bedrooms that we have off to the left side of the home, and I just really love how this bedroom turned out, because I just feel like this bedroom in particular has a very open and airy looking feel, especially since it has these like floor to ceiling windows across like every single angle of this bedroom, which I feel like makes it feel a bit more bright and open in my opinion. And I also utilize a lot of different like objects that I wouldn't generally use, because I feel like they feel a bit more tropical, or I just feel like they resemble a bit more of like a resort like style. So a 4-poster bed is sort of just like unique for my builds, because I feel like I don't really utilize them quite often. I just sort of like generalize them to be seen in like a more resorty sort of environment, if that makes sense. And these are actually the wall sconces that I was mentioning earlier, which had those candles placed on top of them. I just feel like they're just like a really unique looking sconce piece, and I just feel like it kind of makes sense to be utilized within a beach home like this, especially since it's in like a tropical area. You wouldn't really expect electricity and stuff. I feel like it kind of made sense to incorporate candles within this build itself as well. But I did also incorporate a lot of different like unique pendant lightings across all of the bedrooms, and I did also try to make sure to incorporate a different color scheme for all of the bedrooms as well, to make them have a bit more of a variation, and just try to have fun with like utilizing different color and stuff like that to make something that looked a bit more interesting rather than sticking to the plain old like black and white color. But I did actually end up creating a very modern and sleek looking bedroom on the third floor, which we'll get onto later in the video. But right now we're just trying to focus on creating and making this bedroom feel a bit more cozier, just like trying to add some like nice simple flowers across the entire room, just like a lot of different candles, as well as like a nice unique looking sort of like patterned rug design on the floor, which I feel like looks kind of unique and interesting, especially since it's something that I haven't really used quite often. And as I mentioned earlier, we're just like trying to also incorporate different sculpture and clutter pieces that sort of resemble the sea or like the beachy environment, such as like those shells that are like hanging on top of where the bed is, which I feel like was kind of like a nice unique and interesting touch. And of course, like trying to just like utilize these curtains to make the room feel just like a bit more realistic as well, going across the entire room, which I feel like looked really cool. And yeah, so moving on into their ensuite area, which I feel like looks super nice and luxurious. I just feel like it's a really cool way to incorporate an ensuite into a bedroom like this that sort of just like looks out straight into the ocean views. I feel like that is like a very futuristic and sort of like cool looking bathroom design, especially since it has that floor to ceiling glass window just like straight looking out into the sea. I feel like it's just like a nice unique take on a bathroom in my opinion. And I did of course try to make it feel a bit more unique and different from all of the rest of the bathrooms from the rest of the home, just by like trying to add some different accent wall pieces to it, as well as like utilizing different functional objects from it rather than utilizing always the same bathroom and stuff like that for the rest of the ensuites, if that makes sense. But yeah, moving on into the second bedroom that we have on this second floor, we do actually have 3 in total, but 4 including the nursery as well. But this one I sort of just like went with a very bright and orangey theme to it. So obviously initially, as you guys can see, all of the rooms sort of like had this sort of like concrete wall design to it and with the timber wooden flooring, but this obviously always changes depending on the bedroom that I'm sort of like moving onto, if that makes sense. So for this one in particular, we're going for a very nice bright colored one. So we're going for like a very nice bright orange color scheme throughout this entire bedroom, and I just feel like it turned out really nicely overall, especially since it's not really a color that I actually utilize quite often in most of my builds, because I feel like it stands out very much, if that makes sense. So I feel like it was kind of just like a nice way to incorporate a different looking bedroom into one of my builds, in my opinion. And I also went with this very nice simple dresser, which sort of had that wicker design in the center of it, which I feel like is a really nice one to utilize in a lot of these like more modern and contemporary looking beach homes, because I feel like it works really nice and it doesn't really take up a lot of space in comparison to the rest of the wardrobes that you have in the game. And I also learned to sort of just like place 2 of the same mirrors on top of those sort of like dressers, just to make it feel and make it look a bit more interesting. Really love doing that, and I just feel like it's like a nice and creative way of just like utilizing the same mirror and just like trying to fill up that space rather than just like keeping one right in the center, which I feel like doesn't really look that interesting in my opinion. And of course I also utilize some very nice simple wall accent color pieces to make it feel a bit more unique and different from the rest of the home. And moving on into the ensuite for this bathroom, it is actually pretty much the same as the one from the first floor. However, this one is a relatively smaller size than that one, so I just was able to sort of like utilize the same objects from it and just like change it around and just like try to make something that looked really nice and simple. So I didn't really focus on adding too many colors for this ensuite, but I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, just like utilizing a bunch of different functional pieces throughout this entire bathroom, and I feel like it turned out really nicely overall. But yeah, just like trying to incorporate that same color scheme that we had going across within the bedroom itself, such as like that nice sort of like dark turquoisey color, as well as like those nice orangey colors as well. But yeah, I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, and I felt as if the space between both of those doors felt a little bare, so instead I just wanted to incorporate a very nice simple sort of like TV unit area. So the tiny living game pack came in really handy for just like placing a very nice sort of like shelving unit that had like a built-in TV within it. So yeah, it was just like a nice way to sort of like fill up that small little space that we had in front of where the bed was. But this also has a very nice sort of like floor to ceiling glass window display looking out straight into the front of the home, which I feel like also gave the bedroom some very nice views as well. But yeah, so moving on into the nursery area, I didn't really utilize anything specific that resembled the beach or like the sea, but instead I just focused on just trying to create a simple looking nursery that I sort of like generically create in most of my builds, just by like utilizing this very nice simple dinosaur wallpaper that we have going across the entire room, along with like adding my favorite rocking chair from the Growing Together expansion pack, along with utilizing the Storybook nursery kit crib, along with utilizing the Growing Together changing table. And I just went around the entire nursery itself as well, just like adding some small little clutter pieces that would sort of just like be expected to be seen within a nursery. But yeah, so now we're finally moving on into the third floor area for this build now, which is sort of just like seen as the primary suite for this sort of like vacation rental lot, if you'd like to call it that. and I sort of just like went with a super modern and sleek looking design and feel for it. So I'm actually placing this dream home decorator bed straight like sort of like in the center of where the room would be, and I also placed these kitchen cabinets on the side of where the bottom floor area is, just to like act as if it was like some sort of like backdrop area where you can also utilize as sort of like storage. So a lot of these like modern homes would incorporate these very extravagant sort of like bedside drawer unit tables like going across like the backside of the bedroom area, and I don't really see it quite often being done, but I have seen it quite a few times to remember how it was actually being made. And I feel like it's kind of like a nice unique take on incorporating a very modern and sleek looking design in your builds. So I felt like, especially since we don't really have quite a lot of space to like divide and place it into like multiple different bedrooms, I feel like it would kind of made sense to create one really huge extravagant bedroom for the third floor, which I feel like turned out really nice, and it was sort of like exactly as I was envisioning it within my mind. I just really loved how this bedroom in particular turned out, and especially since it has that very nice sort of like over the water look and feel to it, especially with that own private pool like swimming pool area to it. I just feel like this bedroom itself was just like the most luxurious one out of all of them in my opinion. And I also utilized these very nice fancy armchairs which came from the business and hobbies expansion pack, which I feel like don't really look like Max's match. I feel like it really resembles a lot more of the CC type object, and I feel like that looks really interesting in my opinion. So of course wanted to utilize that within this build as well, and especially since it works with the current color schemes that we're going for, I didn't really mind using that within this build itself as well. And of course just adding some additional sort of like small details such as the curtains going across the bedroom, as well as like the ensuite itself as well. And we do also have a very nice sort of like wall of like this like wardrobe area, which I feel like looked really nice and built in, and I just feel like that made it feel a bit more grand and extravagant in my opinion. And of course I also incorporate some nice simple accent walls going across the certain areas of this bedroom, which I feel like kind of felt necessary. And I also utilized these nice simple spotlights on certain parts of where the sort of like storage shelf units were, just so that I can like add some additional lighting to the rest of this build. And I did of course also make sure to incorporate a nice simple pendant light for this bedroom itself as well. But yeah, so moving on into the primary bedroom's ensuite, I wanted to keep it very luxurious and modern, especially since we had quite a lot of space to work with. I feel like it only made sense to incorporate a very nice simple double sink vanity unit area, along with incorporating this very nice sleek looking sort of like bathtub, which I feel like looks really nice and fancy, and it sort of like fit the vibe that I was trying to go for. And we did also incorporate this very nice sort of like gold framed mirrors along each side of where the sink units were, which I feel like felt really extravagant as well. Just like added that pop of color that I feel like was kind of necessary for this very fancy and glamorous looking bathroom in my opinion. And I did also want to incorporate a shower within this bathroom as well, and I feel like since this shower in particular had that very nice simple like gold accent as well, I feel like it kind of made sense and it matched the rest of the bathroom design that we're trying to go for, especially since we did have quite a few objects that had that gold design, if that makes sense. And I did also make sure to add some small little clutter pieces throughout this entire bathroom as well, just to make it feel a bit more realistic, along with changing some of the walls just to like incorporate some accent walls that would make the room feel a bit more luxurious as well, along with like just trying to make it feel as cozy as possible as well, despite it being a bathroom. But yeah, that was pretty much it for the main parts of the home. After this, we do actually move on into populating the rest of the hallways that we have throughout the rest of the home, because we do have quite a lot of these like open spaces along some of the corridors and hallways that I felt like kind of made sense to not really keep empty, but just like add a few objects into it just to like make it feel a bit more functional, such as like some nice small sort of like seating areas. And it just really helped with like trying to complete the home rather than making parts of the home feel really empty and bare. And I feel like by adding some additional furniture pieces to these sort of like small empty spaces, it really did help this home feel a bit more cozy and a bit more realistic, rather than having parts of the home feel really empty, if that makes sense. But yeah, that was pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below if you guys like this build or not. I would love to know your thoughts and suggestions down below. And I do also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in builds like these. So thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.